Did you know that the Common Vulnerability and Exposures Database, the CV, has over 222,000 known vulnerabilities? And that the Common Attack Pattern Enumeration and Classification database has over 550 attacks pattern? Well, now how can an organization, let's say with 5,000 systems and an array of different operating systems and software and devices, meaning from servers, databases, routers, switches, firewalls, will be able to defend themselves against all of this? Well, it's kind of tough, no? So let me explain how we're going to do this and how I suggest you attack this, no pun intended, this problem. Let's flip this on its head, shall we? One of the things that I suggest for you is not to focus on the vulnerability itself, but focus on what the vulnerability will cause. So basically the outcome, what is the vulnerabilities are trying to do on your network, on your systems, and so forth. If you do that, you can boil down to about 6 different outcomes. One is degradation of the system. So some vulnerabilities out of these 222,000 vulnerabilities are aiming to degrade your system performance. So basically slowing down, but not to the point to interrupt business. It might show up as, well, we have an IT-related issue, perhaps, and then with further investigation, you find out that it is not. But it brings the system down in terms of its performance. That's one. The second one is when you escalate beyond that, right? From degradation went to interruption. And that's obviously when the system is unavailable to do your regular business. That's the second outcome of vulnerabilities. A third outcome of that would be in terms of modification. And that is one, the data, and as the name suggests, modification, is modified and from its original form or its original content. That's the third. And the fourth will be fabrication. Now we inputting data. The vulnerability is inputting data on your data stream. That is the fourth. The fifth is unauthorized access. Some vulnerabilities will try to gain unauthorized access to your network. And finally, interception. So vulnerabilities here are trying to intercept the traffic going across the wire, and hence, we'll talk about do not use clear text protocol and whatnot, and trying to get information, trying to get login and so on. So those are the potential outcome of the 222,000 vulnerabilities. So now it becomes a little bit more manageable, right? From trying to protect against 222,000 vulnerabilities and your attack surface is about 5,000 devices with an array of different softwares and versions and firmwares and so on and so forth. I boil it down to about 6. So it's degradation, interruption, modification, fabrication, unauthorized use, and of course, interception. Now that I broke it down and focusing on the outcome versus the vulnerability itself, what do I do? Or what do you do in this case? Well, in this case, we can focus on a strategy that can stop without focusing on any particular vulnerability. It's trying to stop the vulnerabilities that may cause that particular outcome. For example, interception. One of the last ones that I mentioned to you. So interception, trying to see the traffic that goes across and try to read and trying to get the login information and so forth. So what kind of defenses can you put in place to address interception? Encryption sounds like a good idea, right? So when we put encryption as a defense mechanism, and here, I'm not talking about patching right now, because patching is focused on vulnerability itself, per vulnerability. And I'm talking about zone defense versus man-to-man defense. So I'll look into encryption. And encryption is, if I go down to the six outcomes, degradation of the system, encryption is not going to help with that. But interruption of the system, encryption is not going to help with that. But in terms of modification, yes, it will, because it will be encrypted. You're not going to be able to modify the content. Fabrication, be very hard to put information on a wire if it is encrypted, either the data or the channel as SSL. So those are not able, are degradation, interruption, but it will help with modification, fabrication, but also it will help with unauthorized use and interception. So out of the six that I mentioned to you, the solution of encryption will help with 4 out of 6. Not only that, encryption in itself will protect you against how many of the 222,000 vulnerabilities? I don't have the exact number for you, but I bet you it's more than one. Like when you do patching, it's focusing one vulnerability in various assets that have that vulnerability. But it will do a whole slew of vulnerabilities will be eliminated, or at least will cause a degradation on the impact of that vulnerability environment. Now, you do that with other things, and you use this formula, you'll be able to strategically defend your system more on of a zone defense versus a one-to-one patching vulnerabilities. The other thing, the advantage is you're going to be able to measure your environment from a security stand perspective. Not only, okay, I'm up to date with my patch, because if you go from a patch perspective, one is the sheer volume will be difficult. Two, patching only the known vulnerabilities. Now, if I do encryption and a new vulnerability comes out, a 0-day vulnerability comes out, and it is target, that zero vulnerability is target about interception. Well, the encryption, I can rest assured that that vulnerability will have minimal to no impact. Well, depending the scenario. Once again, lack of a context here. However, having that encryption in place and a 0-day vulnerabilities that exploit interception, I can rest assured that my defenses are prepared for that. Now, if I go from a patching perspective, I will have to patch real quick because I'm not prepared for zone defense, but I want one defense. It comes out, a patch comes out, a patch. Now, we still have to do this. I'm just talking these in isolation. This is something that you layer upon. You continue doing your patch. I'm not here advocating, hey, stop doing your patching, let's do zone defense. No, continue doing your patching, but in addition to, focus on a greater defense and a strategic defense of all of your systems, and a way for you to see how mature is your program. Do you have tools that address degradation? Do you have tools that address interception? Do you have tools in place that address unauthorized user? You have tools in place that address modification of the data. So by using the 6 outcome, you can look on any of your environments, from the most critical to the least critical, from the external facing to the internal facing, and evaluate, am I prepared for these type of attacks? That is one way, not only to continue enhancing the protection of the environment, but also to measure the maturity of your program. Now, if you have lack of one of those areas, let's say I talked about encryption, not working on degradation interruption, but let's say system hardening. Oh, no, okay, now system hardening, yes, I can address performance, I can address interruption, and then also I can address modification, fabrication, authorized use, interception, because that system hard, that minimal security baseline. So now, okay, I have something to that. So you compensate. Okay, I didn't have any With encryption, address 4 out of 6. Well, with security configuration, address 6 out of 6. And you so on and so forth. And you build upon. That's the way. Just to flip the system on its head and start practicing zone defense.